Hello, hello. All right, so welcome everybody. We will start our first speech of the day. Today we have an exciting lineup prepared for you. We'll start with Erik the boss. Hello, welcome to Lithuania, Erik. We'll start in just a second while we're still waiting for some more people to come. What to expect, of course, an amazing speech prepared by Mr. Erik, and at the end we will have a code, a QR code, where you can submit your feedback. So I think let's start. So the stage is yours, Erik.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I'm Erik the boss, I'm a Scrum Master, and today I want to talk to you about the mental state of flow. So what is flow? Oh, wait, I'm supposed to stay here because of the lights? I warned them that I'm used to walking around when I'm thinking, so it's going to be hard to stay in one spot. Let me start this talk by asking you, the audience, what do you think about the term flow? What does it mean to you? Anybody? Excuse me? Very good. Anybody else? What's the first thing you think about flow? Yes. Anything else? The most obvious one? Kanban? I usually do this with Mentimeter because then it's actually a lot easier to do it with your mobile phone. But what I'm trying to get is a little bit of a sense of what everybody thinks about when we talk about flow. And it's complicated because there's different things. So for me personally, flow started with Kanban. I loved Kanban because it gave me an explanation for something I did quite intuitively. Don't do too many things at the same time. And here Kanban came along, and there was a clear explanation why. But what I always found interesting about flow is what happens when a team is having Kanban flow. What happens is you get a team that gets confident, it gets cocky. And I found that a much more interesting perspective on flow. So my next discovery was intrinsic motivation, which starts getting closer to my own personal feeling of flow. Now, one of the most beautiful examples of this book, beautiful insights, is right at the beginning. It talks about an experiment with monkeys. And the monkeys, they have to solve puzzles. Well, the fact that they solved the puzzles wasn't the interesting thing. The interesting thing was that they didn't get any rewards for it. And this was a key insight because it was the confirmation that the whole idea of Homo economicus, theory X, the idea that you have to reward, give food, punish people, is unnecessary. People will actually work for pleasure. And that's exactly the way I feel in my work. That's exactly the way I feel when I'm working with a team and we have a sense of flow. It doesn't feel like work anymore. In fact, I'm very happy to say that I've never worked in my life. I just have hobbies. And people enjoy my hobbies, so they pay me for it. As soon as I start feeling like I'm working, that's for me, it's usually a sign that I have to find another job. So taking it from there, my last discovery was this beautiful book by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And this guy talks about flow. It's a little bit more removed from my field of agile, but he's a psychologist. And basically, this guy spent a great part of his life trying to figure out what makes us happy. And what he discovered was that sense of flow that we experience when we enjoy our work, that is actually the thing that makes us happy. So he made a distinction between pleasure and enjoyment. And pleasure is what you feel when you watch a movie, when you eat. They're the essential parts of life. But enjoyment is when you do something which challenges you and makes you grow. And that is the essence of happiness. What's really important about this concept is that he said that flow is everywhere. Yeah, so it's not just at work, it's in everything you do. And also that you can use flow. So it's something that often happens to us without us realizing it. But what he says is you can actually use flow. And one of his most beautiful examples is about a guy working in a factory. So it's really boring work. It's doing the same thing every day. But this guy was able to create a sense of flow, which made him really good at his work, and also led to him enjoying his work very much. And it gave him enough energy that he was able to go out at night and study. And eventually he got promoted, he made a career. But it all started with a very simple job and his ability to create flow at that moment. So keep that in mind, because this is important for the rest of my talk. So summarizing, we have the need of a goal. So that's the purpose that Daniel Pink speaks of. So then you need feedback in order to be able to understand how to reach the goal. And then you need a balance between the challenges and the skills. And if you do that correctly, you end up in that central channel, and that's called the flow channel. And as long as you have that balance between your challenges and your skills, and you stay in that flow channel, you can keep growing. And you're happy. So it's the place to be, so to speak. And I'm going to be using this in the rest of my talk. What's important about this concept of flow is not only that it makes you happier, it makes you more productive. I mean, the whole idea of doing twice the work in half the time, it's actually a byproduct of that flow feeling. And I see it myself with my teams every day. The teams that are really in flow, they're more productive. It's just as simple as it is. Which leads to a very interesting situation. And that's the situation of deep work. Because deep work is not flow. But my conviction is that if you're in a sense of flow, you can also enter in a state of deep work. And deep work is a concept that was coined by Cal Newport. And it's basically being in the flow, but in a very directed flow. So the way I do it is I'm a runner. I really enjoy running, but not so much for the running itself, because that's painful. It's boring. The reason I like to run is because when I'm running, I go into a small bubble. And then the world stops. That's my flow bubble. And when I'm in that flow bubble, I create a space of deep work for myself. So most of the insights and the ideas I develop for this talk happen during my running. If I have to prepare a workshop or a retrospective, I usually do it when I'm running. If I'm having a big challenge at my work, if I feel stressed, then I'll actually drop everything, put my running shoes on, and go out for a run. And usually by the time I get back, I have a solution for that problem. And where these ideas come from, I have no idea. Yeah, that's the beauty of this concept of deep work, of flow, that it triggers something in ourselves, something intuitive, something in our unconscious, which is related to that weird subject of creativity. Because creativity you can't force. Yeah, it's something that just happens. And I see in deep work and in flow the key to reach that point. What Cal Newport says is if you're able to create deep work for yourself, you can be up to 500% more productive. Now that's a big thing. Last but not least, there's quite a lot of research at the moment about cognitive decrease. And literally what they say is starting at the age of 30, your cognitive abilities decrease. It's part of aging. So it's just a process you can't stop. It's just going to happen. But there are different things that you can do to slow it down. You can see the orange line at the top, super aging. It's kind of an illusion. I don't think that really exists, but it's something to aim for. And the interesting thing is that deep work and flow is a way to stop that aging. Sporting is another thing you can do. Music. They're all things that are related to that concept of flow. So, and the reason I'm saying that is summarizing. There was supposed to be another another slide there. Summarizing, flow is something we really, really want to have. Yeah, let me repeat that. This is really important. Yeah, everything we're trying to achieve with Agile, cooperation, safe space, improved productivity, all these things are a result of flow. Yeah, so that's how are we going to achieve that? That's the next question. So how do you measure flow? It's a feeling. It's something we do intuitively. So to test that, I want to do an experiment with you guys. I'm going to show you a bunch of pictures, one by one, not all at the same time. And I want you to, thinking about that sense of flow, in a range from 1 to 4, tell me how much flow these people are experiencing. So if you see someone who's very much in the flow, you will shout 4. If you see a person who's not in the flow, you shout 1. Okay, is that clear? So I really want to hear you. So I'm gonna push you. 4, 4. A little bit louder. Yes. Easy, easy. What did I see? Did I hear a 4? Bit more confusing. Oh, that's a bit dark. 4, 4. Yeah, ooh. Bit of confusion there. Ah, 1. I actually Googled this one. This is blank face. This is, for me, this is the example when you're in a remote meeting and you force your team to put on their cameras and you ask a question and you have no idea what's going on. This is what you see. And that's an important point because I don't know if you noticed, it was really easy for you to answer the question. Yeah, I heard very clearly 4s, 1s. It's something we do intuitively. When we get to this point, and some of the pictures before that, that was a bit confusing. 3s, 1s. That's okay. That's the point I was trying to make. It's like we can feel flow, but we need input. This guy, he's not giving us anything. So it's really hard to figure out what their flow situation is. So our brain is like a computer. It uses information of what we're seeing, in this case, expressions, to be able to measure flow. So I've got another few examples. Yeah, that was an easy one. Oh. I did this in Agile Cambridge and everybody was like, oh. 4. Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting. How about this one? Yeah. Well, this is actually the moment where your instinct starts failing. Because orangutans, they always look like this. I spent a year in Sumatra studying them in the forest, and they always look unhappy. The reason for that is simple. They're lonely animals, solitary animals. So they actually they live in the rainforest, and in the rainforest there's not enough food concentrated on one place for orangutans to form groups. So orangutans, they rarely meet each other. It happens 3-4 times a year when there's a particular huge tree which has fruit all at the same time. So we're talking about millions of fruits. And then you have orangutans coming together and having their social interactions. But the rest of the year, they're traveling around alone. The opposite is the chimpanzee. This is actually the expression of the chimpanzee when he's scared. Yeah, and interesting is that you automatically react to it based on your own natural interpretation of how we express ourselves. So the chimpanzees are very expressive, but they do it in a different way. The reason why chimpanzees are so expressive is because they live in an environment where they form huge groups. In fact, bonobos is the only other species that forms bigger groups. And what's interesting from a biological perspective is that they use these expressions to work together, to manage such large groups. So what we're actually seeing from an evolutionary perspective is how these animals have evolved an instinctive way of managing the complexity of large groups. So in fact, you probably all know this picture. That's the complexity of interactions as the group increases. So if you have a team with 3 people, you only have 3 lines of communication. If you have a team with 11 people, it gets a lot more complicated. Yeah, and from a Scrum perspective, we try to keep our teams to a maximum of about 7 people, because then we manage the complexity. But at the same time, if we look at monkeys, chimpanzees, they form groups of about up to 50 individuals. So you can imagine the amount of lines. That's complexity. Yeah, that's chimpanzees actually managing complexity. Human beings, they take a step further. So this is a stadium, 50,000 spectators. They're doing a wave. How is it possible that 50,000 people, without knowing each other, without planning this, are actually able to make a wave? That is managing complexity. And you can say it's a kind of measuring. Yeah, as soon as you can manage something, you are also able to measure it. And this is really important, because how do we do it? It happens instinctually. It's got to do with those emotions. Now, what do you, if I would ask you the flow question for this group, what would your answer be? 4. And the reason I show this picture is because that's the last aspect of flow which I want to highlight. The fact that flow is more intense when you're in a group. I know that because I was a developer for a long time, 15 years. And this is me, when I had a little bit more hair. With my team, and this was one of the best teams I had. And we were really good as a team. We had flow. And it was a very special feeling. Like, for example, at the retrospective, when we delivered something, there was goosebumps. And that flow is something which you enjoy very much individually. But as soon as you do it with a group, it's really intense. It's a very, very strong feeling. And my idea from a biology perspective, I studied biology at university. It's one of my hobbies. I think that in order to be able to manage the complexity, so live together in such big groups, we need to have evolved not only the feeling how to manage the group, the feeling of flow, but we also need to be encouraged. And so it's hard to work in a group, but if it works, then we get the reward, which is that really cool feeling. And so it sort of adds up together. But this is all hypothetical. I'm still looking for research that proves this. It's a bit difficult to prove. But for me, it feels very logical. It makes sense. So summarizing, flow is something we really, really, really want to have. And now we have to figure out how do we get it. It's fundamental, so it's everywhere. You can find it in everything that we do, not just work. You can measure it in an intuitive way. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but like you just experienced, it is possible. And as soon as you do it in a group, its effect is multiplied. Yeah, so this was my introduction. This is my feeling of flow. Now the next question is, how do we use it in Agile? Okay, let me ask you a question. How many of you are Scrum Masters? Agile coaches? Developers? 1, 2, 3? Managers? Yeah, okay, so you all have experience with working with a team. So how do you answer the question, how is your team doing? Depends, yeah. How do you know which thing you should work on first with your team? They're hard questions. I've been working as a Scrum Master for 12 years now. And if you ask me that question, I say it's intuition. I just feel it. And because I've been working with it so long, I've noticed that intuition works out. So I'm very confident about it. But if I see Scrum Masters starting off, I see people are very confused. How do you know? How do you make those choices? Yeah, intuition. It makes the communication really, really difficult. Applies to the Agile Manifesto too. For me, this is the most important thing there is. I use this in my work constantly. Whenever I have to make a choice, I think about the Agile Manifesto. But if you think about it, how do you know when you have individuals and interactions over processes and tools? How do you know where the balance is? How do you know how to make choices about that? Intuition. And that makes the conversation really, really difficult with management, for example. I find that, for example, if I go to a company, I start off, within 5-6 days, I have a feeling about what's going on. And I can probably start telling management how to fix that. But how do I explain the problem I see? It's intuition. It makes the communication really, really difficult. And the result, yeah, it's this kind of situations. Yeah, so we have management who, they're stuck in the old way of doing things. Yeah, but, clients want deadlines. It's the last question that Martin got. Yeah, how do you make those choices? How do you explain that to management? That's really, really difficult. And the result is that because we're not able to explain it, and because we don't offer management choices, they do the things the way they used to do. And so this is a very big problem we have with Agile. If you think about it, it makes sense. Because one of the most important things we rely on in Agile is empiricism. And what do you need to be able to work empirically? You need to be able to measure things. Yeah, so how do you measure things in Agile? It boils down to the fact that it's got to do with complexity. Up to the birth of Agile, up to the beginning of the 20th century, we were dealing with a complicated world. Yeah, so companies were complicated. Yeah, that's what Taylorism was so effective. Yeah, because the competition, the rate of change was slow enough that you could actually manage things. You could stick to the complicated part. We're reaching a point now where we're gone over to the complex domain. And so the competition is higher, the rate of change is much higher. And now we have faced with complexity and we really have to change the way we work. And this is where flow comes in, because flow is the way to measure complexity. Instead, what do? We develop these kind of dashboards. This is from a corporate where I worked with, where they wanted to get a feeling for the teams. Yes, we management, we want to help the teams. We need to be able to see which teams we need to help. Well, if you ask me, I look at this as like, let me talk to the team. I have so many questions. I don't have any answers. I have ideas of what's going on, but I need the team to explain it to me. Another example. This is from SAFe. SAFe has 7 competencies, and for every competency, they have a survey, which is like lots and lots of questions. If you look at the questions, it's intent. It's not what's literally happening. It's what people think they want. And they're trying to use this to measure the complexity, which is totally hopeless. Now, the only survey which I've found which actually works is from the Liberators. There's 2 guys in the Netherlands. And one of the guys is a psychologist by training. And they've actually been working on this survey for the past 6 years. They have had 10,000 teams who filled in the survey. The guy, the psychologist, he's really, really smart. And this is a model he's built of the survey. So it's the influence of all the different questions. It's really, really complicated. I'm showing it just to make my point that it's really, really complicated. Don't try to understand it. This is proper science. This takes huge amounts of time. It takes huge amounts of effort. And the result is that I have a survey that I use with my teams to start a conversation. Because what they fill in is not reliable. In fact, the worst team I had the best results. Why? Because these guys, they didn't work Agile, but everybody had been forced to do the Agile test, so they knew all the answers by heart. Yeah, so they didn't answer what was happening in the reality. They answered what they thought the managers wanted to know. So they got the best grades. Yeah, and I talked with the liberators about that, and they said, yeah, that's reality. So even these guys, after spending 6 years building this survey, yeah, you still have something which is not completely reliable. So another quote by Cal Newport: as complexity increases, you get into a space which is called the black hole of metrics. It's impossible to measure it. Well, not impossible, but it gets really, really hard. And Cal Newport talks about even individual effort, but it's something that applies to our work in Agile too. So, and this is where flow can help us. If we take this matrix from Knieberg, from Spotify, you see alignment and autonomy. And what I usually see big corporates do is they decide they're going to do Agile. So what happens is they get full autonomy. The teams, they just get all the freedom in the world, and the alignment, it goes down to 0. So you're in this quadrant. And the teams are happy. Yeah, we're Agile. Nobody tells us what to do anymore. And management is, I hope this is going to work. And this lasts for a while until it goes wrong. And what happens then? They go straight back to the top left quadrant. Alignment, management comes back in. It's like, okay, things are going wrong. We have to change this. We have to tell the people what to do. And I've been actually in one corporate where they did that 3 times. My hypothesis is that it has to do with the fact that in a complicated world, we think in black and white. It's a binary world. It's either full alignment, low autonomy, or it's high autonomy, low alignment. And I think flow is the way to find the right balance between the two, so that you can go to the top, right quadrant. Yeah, where you have the right balance of autonomy and alignment, so that you create an effective partnership. Yeah, and how does that flow work? It's got to do with sensing, yeah, the way we just practiced. We sense how the team is doing. Yeah, and we can use flow to find the balance between the challenges they have and the skills they have. So, for example, if a team is going to start doing Agile, that's quite a big challenge. And as soon as you start thinking in terms of flow, that you want to keep the team, you want to keep the team in the flow channel, then you realize that you have to manage the challenges. Yeah, so it's how do you get the team to start doing Agile while staying in the flow channel? Yeah, and this is a completely different way of thinking about Agile. So let me give you an example. When I start with a team, and most of you probably do that too, you join the team and you spend a few days looking what they're doing. And quickly you get a feeling for that. Their daily Scrum is a bit of a status meeting. They're not using sprint goals. And as a Scrum Master, you make this list. And there's all things that you can start working on. But what happens when, for example, you want to talk about goals, sprint goals? You organize a workshop. You encourage them to use Scrum goals, sprint goals. And if you have a team that is nicely in the flow and they're working together, yes, the team starts using sprint goals and it works all fine. But most of the time, you have a team where the whole idea just goes whoosh, and you get the blank faces. And then as a Scrum Master, you're like, oh shit, how am I going to deal with this? Yeah, and then you have to start this iterative process where you're trying to figure out how to help the team. If you think from a flow perspective, the way I approach it now is I make a list of all the things I see are going wrong with the team, but then I don't do anything about it. What I do is I wait and I observe the team, yeah, just like we did, instinctively using my intuition. I try to measure what the flow is. Yeah, I could also measure the skills and then plot it against each other, but that's really hard. Because, like, for example, if you want to work sprint goals, what skills do you need? You need to be able to communicate properly. You have to have a good idea of the roadmap, the goals, the product goal. The team has to have good events. It's all kinds of different skills. That's really hard to get a grip of. It's a complex system. So you can feel the flow instinctively, and then, surprise, the challenge is too big. Yeah, then that makes sense. Yeah, then you can actually judge what the team is ready for. So it becomes a way of understanding how you can teach the team, how you can manage the challenges in order to help them. Yeah, so what I will usually do is in the first retrospective is I'll just observe, or I'll ask something really, really simple. I'll ask, why didn't we complete this item? And I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm just triggering them to see how they interact, because that gives me a very strong feeling of the flow they're feeling. Yeah, sometimes I get a team and they're very enthusiastic and they have a discussion and they say words that I recognize as a Scrum Master. Yeah, we did pair programming, but it didn't really work this time. That kind of answers. And then I get a feeling these guys are in flow and they can handle the challenges. Yeah, and that gives me the measurement that I know what the next step is. Yeah, on the other side, sometimes you get a team where only one person speaks. That's also measurement of flow. Because then I know that the team as a group, they're not feeling that flow. And that gives me the ability to reevaluate the challenges. Maybe I decide to start with something else first. Kanban. When it comes to teaching my team, it's the same thing. If I want to talk with my team about Kanban, I'll evaluate how ready they are for it and what they can handle. But more important is it helps me as a Scrum Master to realize that my job as a Scrum Master is not to have my teams doing Scrum. It's not about having my teams doing Kanban. It's about teaching them to learn. And that's the essence of our work. In fact, when I start with a team, I always tell them, my job, my goal, is to make myself obsolete. I want to teach you how to do Agile. And when you understand the principles, then it's up to you. Then you don't need me anymore. So nowadays, if I want to teach the team about Kanban, I will only tell them about making the workflow visible. This is quite a really simple concept. They usually have a board, so they have the columns. So we can have a conversation about that. That's making your workflow visible. And I'll talk about Little's Law, the work in progress. And that's it. And in fact, everything else, which is Kanban, it comes from that insight. I have had teams who we talk about Little's Law, and I use an example of a coffee shop. And then after the meeting, they were like, oh, but that means that, oh, and that means that. And before I know it, they're managing their work in progress. They're limiting it without me telling them about it. It's something they've realized themselves. And this is essential because that means they're in the flow. They understand the goal. They have automatic feedback loops. They know the challenge and they have the skills to do them. Yeah, so my job as a Scrum Master is to keep the team in the flow channel. In fact, at my current company, my title is Flow Master. And the reason for that is because they had SAFe before I came along and they got really pissed off about it. And then they said, no more Scrum Masters. And now they're realizing we're actually quite useful. But it's a big corporate, Scrum Master is not allowed, so I'm a Flow Master. But in fact, it's more accurate what I do. Because I'm not interested in Scrum, in Kanban, I'm interested in the flow of my team. Because that's what's going to make them agile. Based on that idea, and to make it a little bit clearer for you, because it's a bit of an abstract concept, I developed this matrix. Somebody's going to tell me 5 minutes, so I thought I heard something. That's the reason. It's already 5 minutes? So this matrix, I'm just going to go through it really fast. It's about learning. And what I say is it's about who finds the problem. If you want to learn something, it's usually related to a problem. And who finds a solution. So who actually finds the solution to the problem. And my hypothesis is, from a flow perspective, if the Scrum Master does both, that's bad, because there's no learning for the team. So that's the red area. The team doing both, that's where you want to be, because that's a place where you have maximum flow. So our job as a Scrum Master is only in the 2 yellow areas. So if developers don't see a problem, and the problem is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it's our job as Scrum Master to help them there. Yeah, and it's a question of flow. Because they might be in the flow, but if the problem gets bigger, then it blows up, that's demotivating. So then they fall out of the flow. And in the other quadrant, it's the exact opposite. The team is struggling with a problem, they can't fix it. So as a Scrum Master, you don't want them to fall out of the flow. So therefore, there comes a moment where you have to help them. So I'm just going to fit 5 minutes. Perfect. Last thing I want to tell you is, how do you start using flow? Because probably you all felt it, that it's intuitive, but it's awkward. It's like, how am I going to do that in my work? It's scary. Well, I'm trained as a scientist, so it took me a long time to also get the confidence to do it. So I've got some tips for you. Think about it in terms of flow. Yeah, think about it in terms of, you have a challenge. You want to start working with flow. So make it small. Start with small steps and keep track of how that grows. So start with yourself. As Martin said, every individual is a complex system. You can start tracking the way you feel. Yeah, and you can start practicing, recognizing the flow in yourself. It gives you confidence, it helps you to grow, it helps you to practice staying in that channel. Start paying attention to the flow in your team. That's the next step. Once you start getting a feel for it, just be aware of your intuition. Yeah, and then check it with the results. Yeah, so you feel this is going to hurt the team. Well, after a few weeks, when it starts hurting, yeah, you were right. Yeah, so you're practicing that feeling. At a certain moment, you will be confident about it, and then you can start acting on it. So I'm feeling this with the team. I'm not going to wait until I get my confirmation. I'm going to actually try it and see if it has an effect. And then you suddenly gradually get more and more confident. And the last thing is, realize flow is a complex system. It's a cumulative system. Yeah, that's really important, because it's not about the flow of one teammate. It's the flow of all the teammates and the effect of the flow of the teammates on each other. And it's the effect of the flow in the meetings. It's the effect of the flow at the sprint review, in the communication with the stakeholders, in the communication with management. So it's a really complex system, and that's why it's important to start step by step, because you gradually have to extend that system so that you're able to manage that system from a flow perspective. So I hope this is going to help you. Please practice it. And let me know how it goes, because for me this is also quite new, and I'm still trying to test it. And your feedback can help me to become more confident, and maybe we can actually start creating something together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erik. Now it's turn for our audience. Do we have any questions? Yes, we have a question over there.
Thank you, Erik. As Scrum Masters, managers, and Flow Masters, which I'm almost certainly going to adopt, do we get to participate in and experience the flow ourselves as part of the team, or should we be thinking of this as more centered on our developers? And if we do get to experience it ourselves, does that have an effect on our ability to measure it?
Very good question. There's actually two questions. So I'm going to start with the first one. Do we also participate in the flow? Yes. And I was actually supposed to say it somewhere in the talk. I forgot. I usually act like a clown in my teams. And that's because, especially in corporates, developers take their work way too seriously, and that's hopeless for creativity, for flow. So I do my utmost best to make jokes, make very silly jokes, say very stupid things, and I do it to get a laugh for my teams, but also to show them it's not that serious. Don't make such a big deal out of it. And that's really, really effective to get them into flow. The second question, biases, influencing your measurements. Yes, of course, it's part of the learning process. If you think about complex systems, you yourself are a very, very complex system, and that's why it's so important to start with yourself, because as you start understanding your own flow, you also understand how you work as a complex system, and then you can mitigate the effect you have on your teams. And yeah, experience, it's something that you learn. I sometimes, I've noticed, for example, that acting like a clown, it not always works. And I've had 1 or 2 teams that it worked completely the wrong way. And that's something I really had to learn and realize, like, okay, mental note, check the flow of the team, and if they're ready for a jokey Scrum Master. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Erik. Well, yes, we have one more question. I believe there's still questions online, so that's a reminder to everyone who's watching us online. You can also ask questions.
Thank you, Erik. That was great. So I'm going to copy and try and sneak 2 in, so you can feel empowered to ignore one of them, if you wish. The first one is silence, okay, as a metric for flow. So you talked about intuition. So in what way for you with intuition might silence show up, whether it's kind of thinking positive flow, silence, or whether it's like fracturing the flow? So that's the first question. And the second thing is, you know, let's face it, we're all jealous really deep down, aren't we, of teams that have real flow, okay? So how can organizations leverage, whether it's through FOMO or whatever approach, how can they leverage the power of those teams that are in flow and try and actually replicate that elsewhere in the organization? Thank you.
I'll start with the second question. And I'm going to ask you to repeat the first one because it's
okay, yeah, sure. So the first one was around, you talked about how important intuition is as a metric. So where we notice silence in teams rather than the actual activity.
Okay, silence.
Yeah, how might silence indicate flow? As a positive as opposed to a negative only?
Yes. Silence is something that makes us very uncomfortable, and I notice that people have a tendency to cover up silence, but it's actually a very effective way of measuring flow, because a team that is comfortable with silence is usually a team that is very much able to feel the flow. They're comfortable enough with each other that silence is not a big deal. On the other side, silence is a wonderful tool because I don't know if you people as Scrum Masters, you have that feeling that when there is a silence, you try to fill it in, because it's awkward. Well, let me teach you a trick. Don't say anything. It's like a game of chicken. Yeah, you just wait and look at them, and it gets really, really uncomfortable. And the trick is that the first person who speaks, he automatically takes control of the conversation, takes the initiative. So the longer you wait, the more uncomfortable it gets, and eventually there will be a developer who starts talking. And then you're actually encouraging that flow. And your second question was, I lost it, sorry. Oh yeah, that was also a very good question. Yes, what I like to do is my high performance teams, the teams that are really in flow, they'll usually start irritating other teams when it comes to dependencies. Yeah, the typical example is one of my developers will go to another developer, I need this. And then we'll get some kind of confirmation, and 2 weeks later we'll get the answer, yeah, but you didn't tell my product owner. Yeah, and then I that kind of irritations, they either fix them themselves, they start talking to the other team and tell them, like, come on, man, I just made an agreement with you. So it happens organically. Sometimes it gets a bit out of hand. And that's when I usually organize a workshop. And I just get the teams to get together. I'll use the liberating structures, something like conversation cafe or what do you need from me? And it's just getting the conversation going. My high performance team will usually, you know, they'll show how cool they are. And the other team will say, like, shit, we want that too. And then if you're lucky, you can even start having joint sprint planning sessions where you manage the dependencies together, and then it starts growing.
Thank you, Erik. We have time for one last question that's coming from our online audience. Someone asks, how can team members retain the state of flow in periods of high stress?
Yes. What I've noticed is that if you have a team that really flows, stress becomes an asset. And I mean that in a sense that teams are either, they see it as a challenge, and they're like, sure, give us a deadline. We'll see if we can make it. But at the same time, that sense of flow, it also gives them the confidence to have the conversation if it's unrealistic. So it makes them more confident, cocky almost. I worked in a company where the two owners were, they started a business at university. And they went to clients, they talked to the clients, and they prepared the product goals, so to speak. And then they would give it to the team. And working with the teams over there, we eventually got to the point that the boss, he came to me and he said, Erik, we're going to stop having the conversations with the clients, because whenever we pass it on to the team, they'll second guess us, they'll go and talk to the clients anyway, and they'll come up with much better plans than we had. So we're not going to do it anymore. Now, this is typically something that I discovered with teams and flow, high-performance teams.
Thank you, Erik. So everyone, ecologist turned programmer turned Scrum Master, Erik the boss. Thank you, Erik. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So thanks a lot. This was a lot of fun. I'll be around all day. I'd love to talk about this subject because for me it's also quite new. So please come and ask me questions. And check us out, Scrum Professionals. We're online. We're a small company in the Netherlands, consultants, and we're really trying to change the world. We're a bunch of idealists, and we have a community. You can join our community, and we can even carry on with these conversations there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erik. This is a small gift.
Oh, thank you.